The Supreme Court is adopting a code of conduct following years of criticism over a lack of transparency and the appearance of conflicts of interest. Critics say that a code of ethics is useless without the means to enforce it. Meanwhile, Senate Democrats are advancing plans to impose their own code on justices with independent oversight and enforcement, something the justices say they oppose on constitutional principles. All of them denied any wrongdoing or conflict with official court business. Some have even endorsed the idea of a code. So now I want to bring back our panel here, John Peely, LZ, and joining us is ABC senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer. Devin, we'll start here with you. What are these new rules under this code of conduct?
Okay, this is the first time that the Supreme Court has published and agreed upon a formal code of conduct. It's 8 pages long, and that is significant because it's a huge step towards transparency. What are the expectations around justices with their financial dealings, social relationships, public appearances? All of that is laid out now in one place for the public to read. It says, in sum, justices should avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in everything that they do. But there are no new guidelines here, so there's not actually any new requirement that's laid out. The justices say they've been following these principles for years. They've now put them all in one place for us to see. They've attested to it. All 9 justices have signed on to this document, Kata, which is significant. All said they're honoring it. And the Chief Justice, in a statement at the end of the document, said he's studying new ways to strengthen oversight internally to make sure they comply. There are no conflicts of interest. But to be clear, as you said at the top, there's no new enforcement mechanism here short of impeachment, which would be something led by the Congress if someone violated some of those rules.
And John, taking that to you, I mean, this is the highest court in the land, and we're talking about a lack of enforcement. Is that needed?
Well, I think that it is needed, and I think this is a positive step in the right direction. I'm a little concerned that one party within Congress is trying to exert control over Supreme Court. That really does creep into separation of powers. But it's incumbent upon the Supreme Court to come out with rules that work. I mean, I know it's hard for people to believe, but in Congress, we have a very robust ethics committee. And I was a designated prosecutor for that committee during my entire time in the House, and I conducted some investigations. So, and it's very real, and people pay attention to that in Congress. They need a similar mechanism to the Supreme Court. It needs to be self-imposed by the Chief Justice, and it needs to have something that works.
And LZ, as many people know, Justice Clarence Thomas has been under fire for accepting luxury travel and hospitality and failing to disclose financial ties to wealthy conservative donors. And he's not the only justice under scrutiny. Do you think this new ethics code is necessary?
I mean, it's a sad situation when you have to tell Supreme Court justices not to do something that looks as if you're having a conflict of interest. Like, that to me is the issue, is that this has to be done in the first place. It's like the flight attendant telling everyone to remain seated when there's really just one person standing, and that one person was Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, when you boil it down like that, right, it does seem slightly simple. Peely, what's your take?
Look, it's not surprising that the approval rating for the Supreme Court has been down with the American public for quite a bit. So hopefully, you know, what they're instituting now will help bring credibility back to the court. But as many have said, I agree that there need to be actual repercussions and consequences for justices that violate these rules. And that will hopefully bring them into better standing.
All right. Well, we know that Devin will be watching this for us and bringing us the latest. Thank you, all of you. We appreciate it. John Peely, Tobar, and LZ. Also, we have some breaking news now. We want to take you to Capitol Hill. The House right now is voting on a Republican plan to avert this government shutdown. It is House Speaker Mike Johnson's first major test since taking the job. He faces some serious opposition, though, actually within his own party. And so that means that he will need Democratic support to get this thing across the finish line. This is a twofold plan. It is something that's been done a little bit differently. He is just trying to keep the government open and to avert this shutdown that has been looming, as many of you know. So what you're watching here is you're watching the vote happening live there on Capitol Hill. And so we want to check in with Jay O'Brien, who, of course, is on the Hill for us, and he has been covering this. And Jay, we've been talking a lot, and the big question, of course, it appears, is will he get that Democratic support that it sounds like he really needs to get this thing across the finish line, because he doesn't have all of the bells and whistles that the far-right members of his party were hoping for.
Yes, and Kana, we have breaking news at this hour. It is passed. That continuing resolution that Johnson put, that plan that Johnson put forward, that two-tier system that kicks some federal funding down the road until January 19th and that extends defense funding, homeland security funding, et cetera, to February, it is passed. It passed with more Democrats voting for it, it appears, than Republicans. So just reading this live to you here, the final vote is 336 to 95, 336 yeas, 95 nays. 209 Democrats voted for it, 127 Republicans voted for it. So again, more Democrats in support of this measure than Republicans. So to your point as to what you said, in that the Speaker needed to rely on Democratic votes to get this over the goal line, that is very much bared out true in the final results of this vote. The reason he had to do that was because there were a number of hardline Republicans who said they weren't going to go along with the Speaker's plan. They didn't like that it didn't do enough, they said, to cut government funding and cut additional government spending, and that is why the Speaker turned to Democrats. Late at this hour tonight, we heard from Democratic leadership who said that they were going to support this plan, and that, of course, is what's bared out. 209 Democrats voting to get this over the goal line.
209 Democrats. And so we heard earlier from Rachel Bate, and she's been talking, of course, with Hakeem Jeffries about what the Democrats might decide to do here. And the other looming question, Jay, is if Speaker Johnson does get this support from Democrats, which clearly he did, does that bite him down the line? Will that hurt him after this plays out later?
Well, that's certainly something that hardline conservatives in his party said that they were against. And don't forget, this was exactly why those 8 Republicans voted to oust Kevin McCarthy from his speakership, because a lot of them said he partnered with Democrats to put a temporary government funding measure over the goal line and keep the government funded. That was the reasoning that most of those 8 Republicans gave in their vote to oust Kevin McCarthy. That said, we heard from hardline Republicans who said, A, they didn't like the Speaker's plan, and B, they certainly wouldn't have liked the scenario that is transpiring now, in which there are more Democrats voting to pass this plan than Republicans. But we also heard from those same hardline Republicans who said, despite all of those grievances, they are willing to cut Speaker Johnson more slack than they were willing to cut Speaker McCarthy. And in fact, earlier today, when the House Freedom Caucus, the caucus of hardline conservatives in the House Republican Conference, came out against this temporary funding measure, they also said at the end of the statement, in which they listed all the reasons why they didn't like the Speaker's plan, that they looked forward to continuing to work with the Speaker in the future.
Interesting. All right, Jay, thank you for breaking that down for us. I want to bring in our ABC News contributing political correspondent, Rachel Bate, here. And Rachel, it sounds like Jay touched on something that we sort of talked about here earlier, some of the reasoning behind Democrats supporting this. And you said to me earlier, you know, they don't want to read a headline that highlights them negatively. So how will they be looking at these headlines now come tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think anybody's going to stand up and declare that their party won in this. I mean, ideally, you know, both sides sort of get together and they hash out new spending bills. This is just a kick of the can down the road, a continuation of spending priorities from, you know, the last Congress. And both sides sort of won something and lost something here. For Democrats, they got a continuation of their own funding, so they're going to be happy about that. They didn't have to swallow spending cuts. They didn't have to swallow, you know, toxic policy riders that Republicans happen to love. They didn't have to do that. But they also had to embrace this idea of a two-pronged deadline when it comes to spending. And that's not really the way Washington typically works. They normally have one spending deadline, not two. And this just gives conservatives more opportunities to actually leverage what they want. As for Republicans, they did get those 2 spending deadlines. They don't have to pass legislation before the holiday break. Usually we see lawmakers sort of stack a bunch of deadlines right before Christmas. And what that ends up doing is actually rolling a lot of the rank and file. A lot of times it's Republicans who get jammed on that and end up having to sort of swallow something that they don't like. So that's not going to happen. But again, they're just continuing Democratic policies here. I think just to underscore what Jay was just talking about, Speaker Mike Johnson's first bill that is going to be signed into law is one that received more Democratic support than Republican support. And again, it's a continuation of policies that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer actually wrote. So this is really going to, you know, it's not going to mean he's going to be ousted as Speaker. But conservatives are really going to put pressure on him in the coming days and weeks because, you know, they'll give him a pass on this. But how long will they continue to do that after this?
Right, in his first move as Speaker, he reaches far across the aisle to get this resolution passed, and the government shutdown has been averted, at least for now. Rachel and Jay, thank you very much. We have a lot more coverage on this House vote, so make sure you stay with ABC News Live. I'm Kana Whitworth, and follow ABC News Live on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and more. And coming up here at 7 p.m. Eastern, be sure to catch ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis for the day's biggest stories and the impact they have on you. The news never stops, neither do we. Keep it right here on ABC News Live.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.